do this? Let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, coming in fans, deities, thank you for tuning in to the Hoodoisie. Thank yourself. Sit back, relax, grab a bottle of your favorite spirit and get possessed, or a non-alcohol beverage if you are on them 12 steps, and take in this radical live stream off your computer or phone screens and get radical with the Hoodoisie. The Hoodoisie is keeping it radical in the time of Corona. For those of you that don't know, that's a reference to Gabriel Garcia Marquez' love in the time of cholera. It's not magical, but it's very real. We have teamed up with Southside Weekly to bring you Pandemic Issues, a weekly series where we bring you the analysis and stories that local corporate big screen main media is not. I'm your host, Ricardo Gamboa, or Ricardo Gamboa. Pronouns are they, them, fine as fuck. I am joined by my lovely co-hosts, and I'll let them introduce themselves because people, you know, I don't want to take up too much space. Am I taking up too much space? Asking if I'm taking up too much space? I don't know. Maybe. Go ahead.
Charles Preston, birthday boy. It's my 30th birthday. I work for Injustice Watch, audience engagement manager. Kicking it off to.
Take it, Jack.
So this is Jackie Serrato, editor-in-chief of the Southside Weekly. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And happy birthday, Charles.
Thank you.
It's not about you, Charles. It's about injustice. So we're super excited tonight. This is the first part in a 3-part series on entitled Fighting for Shelter and Place in the Time of Coronavirus. This first one is about rent, Rona, and resistance. And we're so excited for our 2 guests tonight. We have Antonio Gutierrez from the Autonomous Tenants Union here in Chicago, and all the way from Boyle Heights, from Cali, we got from East LA, Nancy. We got Nancy Meza, Boyle Heights organizer, media maker, and a mastermind behind some of the coolest anti-displacement resistance that happened in the past in the century. Because I'm gonna make that claim. All right, so let's get started. I think one of the things that we've been seeing happening is this kind of like question of rent, right? And there's and we've seen kind of politicians nationally kind of pop off and kind of do this performance of care and concern, and yet what we haven't seen anywhere really are kind of actual steps to kind of excuse rent and or provide significant rent relief. And so I know both of you are involved in kind of some of the, I think, kind of most radical and most impactful resistance that we see happening right now. So let's get into it. I guess how I want to first start off is, how did you all, Antonio and Nancy, how did you all become organizers?
I guess I could go first. Hey, thanks for having me on the Hoodoisie. I love the Hoodoisie fam. I wish this could have been in person because y'all's shows are lit. But this will do. Yes, I'm Nancy based out of Boyle Heights. I think for me, I've been reflecting a lot of like, when did I start organizing? And I think for me, it's always important to go back to like my punk rock roots in East Los. So East Los had a really vibrant punk rock scene growing up as a teenager, and I think for me, like really my first steps in organizing were around just really organizing and helping my friends do backyard shows, right? Getting like the flyers out, getting the folks there, getting the bands. And it's been just good, like, kind of going back to that, because I know anyone who's an artist, a musician, just knows how much it goes into like putting an event or an event organizer, things like that. So I really feel like that for me was kind of like my origins of starting to organize and to like focus on hood organizing. Yeah.
And then when did you get involved with kind of the organizing in Boyle Heights, around the displacement?
Yeah, so Defend Boyle Heights started around 2016, so towards the end of the year. And that's really when I got involved. Before that, I wasn't really involved since like 2008 in immigrant rights organizing. And for me, what really made me kind of take that turn from doing immigrant rights organizing to more anti-displacement work was, for me, like I thought about like I'm here fighting anti-deportation policies, things like that, Obama, the mass deportation machine that he built, but I can't even stay on my block. So it was like,
right.
Right? Like, like here we are as immigrant communities. And I think for me, as an immigrant growing up, being undocumented, still being undocumented, like the sense of home that I was able to create in a neighborhood like East LA, like Boyle Heights, it's just so precious. So for me, kind of, it was right realizing that, like, okay, like, what is it that I really value? And it's not really kind of this concept of citizenship or things like that, but it really is like my block in my neighborhood. And wanting to make sure that like that I was part of making sure that we were able to remain in a place we've been able to build for such a long time. Yeah.
What about you, Antonio?
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for having me on this show. My name is Antonio Gutierrez. I use they, them, their pronouns, and I'm in Chicago, Illinois, with the Autonomous Tenants Union. I began organizing after college. I went to school for architecture, and after graduating, I saw that my diploma was only a piece of paper because I'm undocumented, and I couldn't go into my field that I wanted to go. And so instead of being depressed, right, and kind of letting that like bring me down, I went and found a group that was working with undocumented youth and empowering us. The group was called the Immigrant Youth Justice League, and so that was in 2012. I started organizing with them. We were doing some amazing, like, radical work, doing direct action that eventually gave us DACA, right, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival. I'm still undocumented myself, right, and then once I started kind of getting into organizing, I had to get a job, right, to still pay the bills. And I went and found a job as a housing organizer in Albany Park, which is located in the northwest side of the city. And that was kind of my first introduction to eviction work, doing foreclosure defense, working with mostly homeowners at that point. And later on, seeing kind of this shift going from homeowners being evicted due to the housing crisis of 2017 or 2007, and instead seeing tenants being evicted by developers in multi-unit buildings at a mass scale. And so that's when we decided to kind of form the Autonomous Tenants Union, which is an all-volunteer collective in the city of Chicago that works with tenants that are facing eviction.
Yeah, I think one of the things like I think we talked about this yesterday too a little bit, right? Is like how both of you, like both being undocumented, and then like that intersection of like undocumented organizing, and coming out of that, right? And then like locking into like this housing organizing essentially, right? And anti-displacement organizing. What is like the connection that you see there, between that subjectivity, right? That position of being undocumented, because I think one of the things that I was hearing a lot of, even when we were talking yesterday, was like the discussion around, like, Antonio, when you were like, the reality is a lot of people that are being affected by this are also undocumented, right? And things like that. So can you guys talk about that a little bit, and then we'll get into the shit that's going down right now?
Yeah, I could piggyback. I think it's just important, I think, to understand and acknowledge like the role that like immigrant organizers play in housing justice work. And I think like I feel like Antonio and I have been part of like that, like past like immigrant youth organizing, right? Where we're very intentional about using direct action as a tactic that had results. So I think, a lot of us, that are now doing, like anti-displacement work, anti-gentrification, housing rights, come already kind of prepared using like these really kind of radical tactics that we've used in the past, right? It's kind of like bringing them into this new playing field. And I think for me, when I talk to anyone around like why the organizing in Boyle Heights looks the way it is, it's because it's being led by our immigrant elders, like it's the señoras, it's the dones that are like leading rent strikes, leading actions, leading strategy. And it's because they're the most directly affected, right? When you think about the current pandemic and everything that's going on, it really is, immigrant workers, especially like our immigrant elders and just immigrant communities are heavily devastated by, they just have a different layer of oppression. And I think when you look at the housing justice work, it's just really interesting to see how many of us kind of made that shift, right? From like the immigrant rights organizing we're doing into then like straight up like diving real deep into the housing justice work. And I see like a lot of organizers like that I used to organize with, like doing deportation defense, right? Doing organizing now doing into that work. And I think it's because it's where our communities are being affected the most, right? When you look at displacement, I think for me, like I am not apologetic about saying that gentrification and displacement is forced migration. So I know for me as an immigrant, I really view that process of displacement as a process of forced migration, because a lot of us, right, like left our home countries for really fucked up reasons due to capitalism, and we're able to kind of recreate community and recreate a sense of belonging and being that can't be bought, right? And also it's hard to replicate once you go somewhere else. I think like the value of the community and the kind of sense of home that we're able to build as immigrant communities is something that deserves defending. And I think that's kind of why you see the like massive amount of energy and coraje, right? And the work that we do when it's led by immigrant communities, because it just really means so much to us in the way that we are.
Mm.
I think in Chicago, very similarly, right, we're making connections between these other types of forms of displacement that exist in our communities and ways that the system that we live in, right, oppresses us as brown, as undocumented, as immigrants, as tenants. We have created relationships between how evictions, deportations, mass incarceration, right, is all forms of displacement for our communities. And so we have created coalitions around that type of work. I get to be, my day job, right, is being an anti-deportation organizer. I volunteer with the Autonomous Tenants Union as an eviction organizer or tenant organizer. And that type of relationship is really important, right? Because you can stop somebody's eviction, but they might still be put in deportation proceedings, right? Or they might be in deportation and you might stop that, but at the same time, they might be losing their home or being evicted from the community that they've been building connections and networks of support. And so that's really important to kind of make sure that we are addressing that intersectionality that exists between all of our identities.
Dang. So Antonio, people is gonna be getting kicked out their houses because it's hard to pay rent right now, right? Let's be real. And I'm kind of joking around, but for real, right? Can you talk to us about what's happening with the Autonomous Tenants Union? How you're taking on the reality that how are we gonna pay rent during the coronavirus? And what's kind of that landscape?
Yeah, so in anticipation, right, of what kind of the pandemic that was kind of coming in early March, the Autonomous Tenants Union, mostly working with working class, undocumented immigrant tenants in Albany Park and in the city of Chicago, we realized that many of our members were starting to get laid off, that many of them were worried, right, that this pandemic was going to have some kind of effect on their finances. And so in response, we created an online petition or platform for tenants to start requesting some kind of rent relief or cancellation of rent during the pandemic months. We didn't know for how long we were going to be in a shelter in place, right? We didn't know for how long this pandemic is going to be really in, and we still really don't know that either. But we created this platform in order to kind of create a base of individuals that were foreseen already having difficulty paying rent, or that they currently are having difficulty paying rent, and creating a way of them being able to connect with one another, not only coming together in demanding the cancellation of rent in the state of Illinois, right, such as our petition does, but also in a way still remain in contact with updates about policies, about direct action, about tenant organizing trainings, so that they can start creating autonomous tenant unions all around the city of Chicago, but also in the state of Illinois, and then also follow this model of what it looks like to create a tenant movement that is really putting those directly impacted at the forefront and being their own self-advocates in the process itself.
And what are kind of some of the things that are happening right now, some of I know there's a petition, right, where you guys are working with 17,000. You guys have already got 17,000 people to sign a petition, and the work around the Lift the Ban coalition. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so overall the petition has over 17,000 people, right? Those 17,000 people are individuals that we're still continuously engaging with, right? Letting them know about our next steps or what can they do. Maybe they can do call-ins. Right now we're working on the filings aspect of eviction, right? So regardless of the executive order from the governor of the state of Illinois that was announced at the end of April, where he was saying that no filings should be happening in Cook County, where Chicago is located, filings are still occurring. And so we've been keeping track of that public data. There's been more than 500 filings during the pandemic or since the shelter in place got announced in the state of Illinois. That means that landlords are not really working or negotiating with their tenants, and instead they're giving them 5 days notice and moving with the eviction process regardless of eviction court being closed until June 1st here in the state of Illinois, right? That shows that those landlords are not really willing to see the humanity in the situation that we're facing. That is very unprecedented, and it's unfortunate that we are seeing that aspect of that response from landlords and landlord associations in a way that is it takes the aspect of collaboration, right, and this aspect of dialogue to come to the best negotiations, a compromise that we can come up with, as well as we are working on lifting the ban. In the state of Illinois, there is a ban that prohibits rent control policy in any municipality in the state of Illinois. This ban has existed since the 90s here in the state, and it's been very difficult to convince the governor, right, that they need to lift this ban. Currently, we believe that Governor Pritzker in the state of Illinois has the power to lift this ban with his executive power, and he's refusing to do so based on the fact, right, that many of these landlord associations are also whispering into his ear, right, and that he needs to remain somehow accountable to them because many of them have contributed to his campaign when he was running for governor. The other things that we're doing, right, is such as providing support to the mutual aid funds that have been organically growing out of the necessity of the community, and making sure that those mutual aid funds are not being used for rent relief itself, right, but for immediate needs and necessities of our community, such as food and medical care, and instead promoting tenants to know their rights about eviction court being closed right now, about the fact that filings are very limited, and that is landlords are putting them into eviction process, right? They're looking at least until July or August in the state of Illinois, at least, or in the city of Chicago, of an actual physical eviction to happen, right? And so we also been doing a lot of different virtual meetings, from a town hall that we did on April 1st that brought hundreds of people that had signed a petition already, right? And that wanted to learn more about what it meant to do tenant organizing or what it meant to do a rent strike, because for the first time, and out of a necessity, right, and not really a political choice, they were defaulting on their rent, right? Or they were doing a rent strike without really knowing what to do after that. And so we've been following up with those conversations and giving the information that tenants need in order to make those decisions collectively, and in a way assuming best practices around tactics to get what they need to get from their demands that they're getting from the landlords.
Dang, thank you, Antonio. You are
Nancy.
such a Gemini. It's crazy.
One of the reasons that.
But I'm laughing because Antonio's actually a Libra, but I just want to throw
so
that
Nancy,
out there.
So I'm having technical issues. I'm not sure if you can hear me or not, but I had a question for Nancy. I've been following the anti-gentrification movement in East LA for about 5 years. And the reason why I was so attracted to it was because it reminded me of the Young Lords, which were a group of Puerto Ricans and Mexicans in Chicago's North Side, right around the time when the Black Panthers and the Brown Berets were around. And they were the first documented case of gentrification resistance at the grassroots level. And they were pretty bold about their tactics. So I've been very impressed about the work that Defend Boyle Heights has been doing in the past few years. Can you talk about some of the actions and protests and just different mechanisms that you've gone about to bring attention to the issue of displacement in East LA?
Yeah, I could definitely get into that. And thanks for following the work. I think, when you're doing this kind of work, you have so many haters that you forget that there's people who are actually like rooting for you, right? Or like hoping that you win. Yeah,
That's good. I'm glad you said that, Nancy, because I feel like I get scared.
the fight.
I get scared because I'm always being like, yo, Nancy,
I think
we're going to fly
when
you
you're
out to
doing the work,
Chicago. Can you be on the Hoodoisie? I'm like, Nancy, can you? Oh, man.
No, I love my Chicago fam. Like anytime, yeah. But I feel like when you're, I always tell everyone, when you're doing anti-displacement work, when you're doing anti-gentrification work, like it's really intense work. Like it's definitely not work that's kind of gets you quote unquote popular, right? You're really going against this norm, right? This mainstream idea around capital, right? Around capitalism, this capitalistic idea that neighborhoods should be bought and sold and things like that. And I think, for me, I feel like the intensity of the anti-displacement struggle in the East Side has a lot to do with the fact that we're a very tight-knit community. And I think, the first time I went to Chicago, I think it was already like 2 or 3 years ago. Time is weird. Or the first time I went to Chicago, like I feel like I felt the same sense of community that I felt here, and it was in Boyle Heights, and East LA. It was so weird. But I feel like that kind of close-knit community and the tightness that we have has a lot to do with like the way that we're able to organize. I think I feel like as Defend Boyle Heights, what we get asked a lot is like, how do we communicate, right? How do we get the word out so fast? How are we able to mobilize people so quickly? And I think a lot of the ways that we're able to do that is because people have known each other for forever, right? Like I know when Defend Boyle Heights first formed, like, I was organizing with people that I went since elementary school, right? We're organizing with people from the neighborhood. We're organizing with our blog. We're organizing with the señores and the doñas that we see like at the mercado, that we see at the park, right? So it wasn't like us trying to convince people we didn't know. It was more like really like activating everyone that was already in our network. And for a lot of the times we're already involved, right? It was more like it was us as the young people catching up to a lot of like the tenants rights organizing that have been happening since the 90s to really defend public housing, right? I think, when I look at organizing, I always look at Unión de Vecinos, and I think, I feel like another reason why we've been able to kind of be as successful is because of the autonomy, right? How autonomous we are, and that, and I'm so glad to hear like, stuff that's happening with the Autonomous Tenants Union, because I think my biggest lesson learned from like the Defend Boyle Heights organizing is that there's just so much power in autonomous organizing, right? Organizing that is done when people are out of work, when people in people's free time, out of like the love and rage of their hearts. I think when you look at movement building, especially with the nonprofits, a lot of it gets really structuralized, right? And I think autonomous organizing really gives you the opportunity to organize the way that you want to, and the way that the hood has been organizing, right? We don't have to kind of conform to this mainstream or kind of bureaucratic way of organizing and having your voice heard. And I think, for Defend Boyle Heights, we were, for us, I think why we came out so strong is that because we were tired of gentrification being a debate, right? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it community improvement, right? So for us, we felt like we needed to step up and start the conversation at the fact that gentrification is not a natural process of community development, right? And that it is something that is not up for debate, right? Like really kind of stating the facts that gentrification has always led to the complete destruction and erasure of working class communities, right? It is not a urban planning vehicle that is meant to like uplift our communities, right? And I think because we started there, we're able to kind of be so bold, right? That we no longer wanted to have a debate. We were having a fight, right? We were having a straight up fight. Right? We're not here to debate you. We're here to fight you.
We are done talking. We had this conversation. You don't get it, right? Like this Starbucks is not making our schools better, or not for our kids, right? I think though, like, so like
Yeah.
how, because I think one of the things that marked Boyle Heights was like y'all were fighting, right? It was like, we're gonna shut down your gallery. We don't care if you're gonna make a 5K donation or let some brown kids take some art classes here. You know what I mean? Like, and you all were like, yo, like, so I mean, it's real though, right? That's usually what happens. They're like, we made a donation to the local school, but I think
Yeah.
but I'm like wondering, like, you know, and so like, and you all were shutting it down in a very real way. You know, it got you all got painted as just being needlessly hostile, right? How have things kind of? But then there was like these really kind of like flashpoints, like the Mariachi strike, right? That
Mm-hmm.
red strike, and you know, how have you seen that kind of develop? How have you seen the work change, or what have you seen change in the context of La Corona, which is coronavirus for short? Also, really quick, Antonio and Jackie, when Nancy came, I took her to Jacaranda and then to Caminos de Michoacan, and I still like have to, when I want to remember that night, I just got to scroll through my Instagram and look through photos because I don't remember half of it.
Good picture.
Yeah. We're like bar hopping. Oh my God. Caminos. Shout out.
Get into it.
Oh,
Miles
Caminos.
knows it.
Yeah. That was so fun. Yeah, I think okay, Ricardo, sorry. Yeah, you know, and I think, you know, when I look at the current rent strike right now, right? So currently there is an active campaign kind of similar to the Autonomous Tenants Union here in California, right, as a state. So that we do have like different tenants unions and locals who are actively engaging in the rent strike. And for me, you know, like um I'm glad that you mentioned the mariachi rent strike because, you know, like, so this isn't the first time that we've been on rent strike as a neighborhood. So I know for me and for like a lot of the neighborhood, our first kind of like hood support for rent strike was in 2017. When we were organizing at Defend Boyle Heights, you had some mariachis who worked out of the plaza, right? This is pre-pandemic, who actually got like an 80% increase in their rent. Like that shit was crazy. Um, they at that time, right, there was no tenant protections, there was no eviction protections, and they actually just they instead of, you know, negotiating with the landlord or figuring out like, you know, ways to make up that rent, what they did is that they actually organized an entire building, right? So these are again immigrant musicians, immigrant artists who make their daily bread, like, you know, on the street corner, you know, off gigs, and they were able to organize, you know, their entire building. And I think the power with that is, one, they were able to do that because so many people had lived there for so long, right? So there was already those kind of relationships. Folks knew each other, folks kind of grew up with each other. So when it came time to build solidarity, because that relationship was there, it was easier for them to do that. And what made it even better was literally the whole neighborhood jumped on board with the rent strike, right? And supported them, you know, and like making sure that,
Y'all
you know, there
radical
was
Sesame
people
Street.
on call. Huh?
So y'all radical Sesame Street up in this bitch. The whole neighborhood came together.
I'm like, was it a
And
block party?
then
Like, how did
Right.
that happen? How did
I
it?
was
How did it
like,
hit
where's
that?
this neighborhood at?
yeah, like, you know, so when the Mariachis went on rent strike, they organized the whole building. They had like a community screening and like a gathering like in the alleyway behind the
Wow.
building. And it was like there was sandwiches. I remember because the sandwiches were bomb, right? And like they were, yeah, they invited like everyone from the neighborhood to kind of learn of like why they were on rent strike and what support they needed. Yeah, so it was like everyone in the neighborhood knew what was happening, everyone knew what was going on, and everyone was there supporting. A lot of it was also, I think, you know, we're known in Boyle Heights a lot for just hella trolling the fuck out of our enemies, you know. So like we, you know, we basically like shamed the hell out of like the landlord that was doing this crazy increase, you know, protested at his house. And one of the main reasons that he sat down to negotiate with the mariachis was because his wife was telling him like, I'm tired of your face being in the news in La Opinion, right? I'm tired of like people knowing like what you're doing, you know. So kind of really exposing, right, the shadiness helped a lot. But it was a whole neighborhood ordeal, you know. And I think now, you know, so for the current rent strike, the narrative that folks are using, or that we're using, is this idea of food, not rent, right? And and I think, you know, like, so we launched the rent strike on April 1st, and I think we were one of the few neighborhoods to actually launch a rent strike. So we had an actual action, you know, social distance action, where community members showed up, right? It was kids, moms, pops, like local rebels, and it was kind of like declaring strike, right? I think At that point, the folks had around 30 families that were on rent strike, and the narrative around that folks are currently working on is this idea of food, not rent, right? This idea that we don't know how long this pandemic's going to last, and two, that we cannot trust the government. One, right, the government has not proven to be able or competent in the past, and we don't trust that it can be in the future. So it really is kind of like a plea for folks to kind of assess the situation, right, and be like, in this current state of moment of time, like, look at the resources you have, right? Like, are you gonna pay rent, or like, would you rather save that for food, resources, medicine, things like that? Like, taking a real ass look at the situation.
So you're
His hands shut up.
you're telling me that a government founded on genocide and stealing land isn't doing anything to help people at a time of a pandemic to stay in their homes? I feel very blown by this concept.
Wow.
But I do think one of the things I'm thinking about too, right, is this idea. You guys both kind of like, Antonio, you brought up Pritzker, right? And right now, Pritzker, comparatively to some governors who are like, Trump mouthpieces or surrogates, it seems like he's been getting a lot of kind of like positive feedback because he's been standing up to Trump and things like that, right? And then I think, Nancy, you just recently, there was a politician, a city council person that just got called out in California, in LA right now, right, in Boyle Heights, for kind of corruption. And I'm thinking about that because even in Chicago, just last year, Pilsen, the neighborhood that I live in, that's been combating gentrification, the alderman here, the previous alderman here, just got called out, was involved in all sorts of kind of scandal and corruption. Essentially had to wear FBI wiretap for 2 years. Danny Solis, he looks like a Muppet. That shouldn't matter, but I just need to say it. And then I'm even thinking about, even recently, Byron Cicho Lopez, who, Ecuadorian American, came here, is the, won back the ward for progressives, right? And was marching alongside people from Little Village, our neighboring ward, while their alderman did nothing after a bombing, essentially, right? The blowing up of a plant, the implosion of a plant that covered the community with particular matter. And so I think one of the things I'm thinking about is immediately we see these Latino politicians, for example, Alex Acevedo, who ran for alderman out here, who said he wanted to run on clean air, all of a sudden using these moments to politic, right? Saying like, why is this person marching with another ward besides ours? And I'm like, bro, ain't you for clean air? Like, why are you trying to use mass death as a reason to get loyalty, homie? And why do you wear all that gel in your hair? But so it doesn't matter, but I need to say it. But I'm saying this because I feel like both as like a brown person, we're talking about, in Boyle Heights, brown politicians, and then both in a moment we see politicians constantly being reified for doing the least, right? Like, while not making very substantive things like rent refusal, like, and I'm interested in like possible, how are you all organizing with politicians? Because I know part of the Lift the Ban coalition, Antonio, that you're a part of, right, is working with, with certain legislators and things like that. That's, and so Nancy, I know Boyle Heights has been like, nah, fuck that. But you guys are also working within the system, right? Not working within the system, right, in Boyle Heights, but kind of taking advantage of certain government provisions. So you guys talk about that a little bit. Yo, that's the longest question I ever asked in my life.
Record.
Right. Sean, can I get some more wine, please? This is my partner. I'm on a roll. Cool.
Yeah, I'll start just by saying, right, that ATU is not really working with any elected officials, right? We're holding them accountable to the job that they signed out themselves to do. And so when Pritzker is saying, well, I'm doing so much, right, and that this is why I cannot do cancellation of rent, that is not a reason, that is an excuse, right? And so our job as ATU has always been to pressure them. And the way that we pressure them, right, is by not working with them and sitting in the same table with them, right, is by organizing tenants, empowering them so that they can be the ones holding them accountable. And so that's always been kind of like our way of seeing that type of legislative work, right? That ultimately, yes, the Lift the Ban, right, is a big coalition, and there's different tactics and different strategies to get to the same goal. We all understand that, right? We understand that as ATU, our role is to be the agitator and to be the one that is kind of pushing the boundaries and that is making sure that even our nonprofits, right, are going into more of the left and more radical like strategies and creative tactics And so that's always been kind of like our understanding when working with elected officials themselves.
I have two things to say that are very important. One, Antonio, next time just at me. All right. They were like, we're not actually working with politicians. No, it's cool. I get it. We're not friends. And not yet. We're both air signs. We'll get there. And then Nancy, I just want to say my favorite thing about this interview is your señora moments where you take out your pencil to take down a note. But go on ahead. What were you know, take it away. I know.
Yeah, well, because you asked like 5-minute questions, and I'm like, what do you say? Yeah, no, yeah, I appreciate. No, yeah, I'm a señora, I'm a doña in training, and I'm taking my doña training years very seriously. So that is a huge compliment. Thank you.
Yes, me too.
Yes.
Hashtag team.
Yeah, I think, you know, for the East Side, I feel like, you know, I think one of the, like, I think what makes me kind of proud of this moment is the fact that we kind of been building, right, the past 5 years, the past 10 years in the neighborhood, really for a moment like this to really be able to take advantage of the kind of rare opportunities that we have that we didn't have in the past, right? So I think, you know, when COVID-19 hit, right when coronavirus hit, like, it was just so crazy to see how fast, you know, like housing rights organizers, anti-gentrification were able to organize quickly, to kind of be like, okay, people are not going to be able to pay rent like tomorrow, right? With everything happening, and right now, I think one of the biggest opportunities that we have is there's currently like this really fucking huge corruption scandal happening in the city. And the main, I guess, protagonist is our own council member, Sleazy Weezy.
Sleazy Weezy.
Sleazy Weezy. He is so sleazy. Like, like that is a hashtag that we dubbed him like 3 years ago, Sleazy Weezy. He's just like,
that should be
but it works. Like, it's so rhymey for like kids to say and everything. Like,
it could be a children's song. Like, don't be sleazy like Weezy. but okay, so fucking Jose, we said straight up, his house was raided by the FBI last year. Right, he's kind of currently under FBI investigation for this like pay to play scheme. So really like, you know, bribing developers or accepting developer bribes in order to push through different developments. And I think, you know, if you're from Chicago, if you're from Boyle Heights, you're from LA, like we just all know that like shady shit happens, right? And that projects get pushed forward with basically like no regard to community interest, right? So one of the things that we set up in Boyle Heights is that like a lot of these processes are sham, right? That kind of like things are already set in stone and deals already made. And that, you know, when you have this kind of like lame ass community engagement process of community meetings or like listening sessions, it's just kind of to like check a box, right? That really isn't a engagement process because the deal's already made. And I feel like that's the current opportunity that we have with our council member, right? The fact that things that have come out, right? That's like he's accepted like straight up like bags of money, bribes, flights, you know, sex workers, like homie's been having a good time, you know, on our dime, having a good time on our dime, as being hella sleazy, right? So I think, you know, that's
literally, Nancy, what you're just saying is literally what happened with Solis, right?
Yeah.
Like, we found out he was using like government credit cards and shit for like you know, to get happy endings. You know what I mean? Like, it's true, like, you know, and it's just so bizarre, like, you know, because I'm like, how it like, because what it points to is like a continuity of power. And
yeah.
I'm sure this guy, like the last alderman here, was someone that also got elected in their moment, kind of using rhetorics of change, rhetorics of progressive change. I just feel it's very important. I'm gonna take a sip of rosé. I want everyone to watch me do it. I'm gonna make it very artful. Remember when I was complaining about the lighting? It was actually that I had the dimmer down on my computer screen. But let's keep going. All right, go next. So as you were saying, government corruption from the city council person. Chicago knows it very well. We actually, our mayor right now, Rahm Emanuel, we thought that he lost, but he actually just put on the skin of a Black lesbian woman and is doing the same things that he was doing before. So we're working through it right now.
You forgot the fedoras, right?
Right. And Rahm is like, yo, I get to put on some fedoras. I get to get my bishop on.
But I would like to like transition and ask so how can people like not only tap into this work but like what tactics could they use, like say for anybody watching this live stream and has trouble paying rent, like what does the ATU propose they do, or Boyle Heights?
Mm. Yeah, I think that here in Chicago, you know, just surprised to hear what Nancy's saying, right? That people tend to have already all this like connection with each other and kind of like knowing one another. In Albany Park is very different, mostly being an entry port for immigrant communities, right? Is that very recent arrived immigrants come to this neighborhood. And so a lot of the times, right, people don't know each other. They don't have those connections. And I will say that the first step that people need to do if you cannot pay your rent, right, is talk to your neighbors, right? Because they're most likely they're in the same situation and you need to unify with them because you're going to have much more power when you are working collectively than you are asking for the landlord on your own, right, for some kind of negotiation or compromise, which at the end of the day is not going to really empower you and it's not going to really get the results that you need and that all of us need right now in this pandemic. So talk to your neighbors and kind of create those connections and get to know your rights, because that's what you get to do, right? Like we get to know and enforce our rights and that regardless of being undocumented, we need to understand that we are as humans as anybody else, right? And that we get to raise our voice when something does not go our way or when something is oppressing us or when something is affecting us in different ways than others.
Yeah, I would say like in California, we have this really unprecedented opportunity in terms of there's currently a ban on evictions. So I think similarly, like, you know, we've been doing a lot of like know your rights and encouraging people to, talk to each other. You know, luckily we have a lot of organizers on the ground that kind of have been connected to the local tenants unions, and kind of the local unions are growing literally by the week. But I would say like the biggest thing is kind of knowing that you have power, right, as a tenant. And I feel like just, again, like at this one, we can't really trust the government for anything. So it really is kind of assessing our current resources that we have and figuring out where we need them the most, you know, and making that bold decision to say that, like, I'm going to keep these resources for me and my family if you have them, right? And I think something that here in California we've been talking is like how whether people like it or not, the majority of folks pretty soon will by default be on rent strike, right? So that's just kind of right the economic reality that the economy is not going to get any better anytime soon. It hasn't been good for our folks for a long time or ever. So I think the biggest thing for us is that we just, similar, like tell folks, like just connect. For everyone on rent strike, what we highly suggest is getting in contact with like either like a local tenants union or even like your friends, right? Telling your friends that you're on rent strike, because what we know is that landlords are going to do shady shit, right? They will come and try to evict you. They will try to coerce you to signing something, right? They will use intimidation tactics. So it's always just good to have like a network of people that you trust that you can go to, like, yo, I got this letter, what's going on? Like, my landlord's trying to scare me. And kind of where we've seen where the rent strikes are the strongest is where kind of like the support group around the rent strikers is bigger, right? And that's something that we've been trying to do here in Boyle Heights. You know, like I'm part of the propaganda committee. So what we do is like for folks or buildings that are on rent strike, we just provide the propaganda and like media and like tech support to help them organize, right? Just to know that they're not alone and that they can do this, and just being there as watchdogs. Because I think, like it's really hard to like battle your landlord by yourself, right? Because they will lie to you. They will send you legal notices that aren't even legal, right?
Yes.
Like that. So it just always helps to have a squad supporting you, even if it's just like your family or your friends. You know, it has to be people that you trust.
I mean, I think Nancy, one of the things I'm thinking about is like, because I am a radical bitch, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm saying that because I when I met you, I was like, oh, like we speak the same language, right? And then I was like, we talked for like 20 minutes. I was like, oh, like, are you more extreme than me? Because that's like, I'm an Aquarius, right? With the Leo rising, like that's hard. Like, And then, like, I think when we were talking yesterday, you were like, well, you know, we're organizing with some landlords right now. And I was like, wait, what? And like, but I think actually it makes, you know, I also do think, right, like revolution is a relation, not an event. And so it's not just like about the overthrow of these people in this one moment. It's also like, how are you constantly relating to the world in revolutionary ways and inviting people into that revolution? So you talk a little bit about that, because even when I remember when we were on the call yesterday talking about this, and you're like, you know, we were even including landlords on this. Antonio's like eyebrows were like, like he was like, wait, because and you know, and we were in that conversation. Antonio, you were like, yo, because landlords in Chicago ain't being cool like that at all. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, you know, like as we're pushing for tenant protections, like one of the things that we knew we need to address was kind of like, right, like in this notion, this narrative, like mom and pop landlords, right? And but that's the reality, is like there are like folks in the community who are working class folks who might own property who also got laid off, right? Who can't make their mortgage. So one of the ways that we're able kind of like to broaden that like solidarity is like also asking for landlords to join with renters in like doing a mortgage strike along with the renters, or doing a mortgage strike as a way to kind of send in solidarity also with tenants. So I know, for example, like a lot of my some of my friends who could have paid their mortgage didn't pay their mortgage in solidarity with the rent strike, because they're just like, there is no way I'm giving my money to banks right now, you know. And for us that was kind of an important step, because one, right, like that population does exist and it can be activated and it can be organized, but it needs to be organized, right? So it's not just saying like, okay, we're gonna soften up on tenant protections because there's some mom and pop shop landlords that might be affected. It's kind of giving those mom and pop shop landlords also like an activation point, right, and the decision of joining, and kind of also them seeing the power of joining, right, and also kind of protecting their resources, right. Again, and also kind of like the way that some tenants have used that is like they've actually been able to talk with their landlords and have their landlords join the mortgage strike, so that way they could, as tenants, could join the rent strike in a just more like less intense, you know, like less chaotic way. But it's just about getting as many people as we can on our side. And the reality too is here in California is that the majority of our private property is kind of like private companies and corporations, right? So it's still kind of keeping the pressure on them as well. And I know like one of the biggest demands right now is that like rent forgiveness be paid through by taxing corporations, right? Like taxing the wealthy, and that's a way that we could make that happen.
I just love the idea of like going up to these landlords that have like this petty bourgeoisie, right, and being like, come to the dark side. Charles, Jackie, you got anything? Because I have like 7
just to develop that point a little bit, I have noticed that when a neighborhood like recently engages in a new conversation about gentrification, there tends to be a division between like tenants and homeowners, right? And at least in Chicago, it's a fact that there's a lot of working class people, working class families who actually own their home. And so they are hesitant to support tenants who are fighting for their rights. They're hesitant to support rent control or rent regulation because they believe that it's going to impact them disproportionately or directly. So I think it's important to make the distinction between like small landlords and like big corporations and LLCs. Antonio, maybe you can talk a little bit more about this, because I know that you recently came up with like a wall of shame for landlords, for big landlords, landlords that are still evicting people during the pandemic. So can you talk more about that wall of shame, and also how do you when you're organizing distinguish those big corporate landlords from your typical mom and pop landlords?
Yeah. So first of all, right, the petition that we started in March around the cancellation of rent demands, or rent freeze, as we call the petition itself, was not just asking for cancellation of rent for tenants, right, but also was asking for cancellation of mortgages for those small landlords, right, those working class landlords that at one point were tenants, right, that many of the times come to the United States, right, wanting to achieve the American dream. I'm sure we can go into and discuss what the American dream is, right, like who it actually is there for, right, and not really for individuals like us. But that overall, they want to kind of have that aspect of having financial stability and having to create profit, right? And to eventually have much more wealth that they can be able to inherit that to their kids. And so that's a reality. And with the conversations that we've been having with those landlords, it's definitely been a struggle. It's sometimes really hard to get them to understand, right, that this idea of an American dream is not going to be really a possibility or real for them, right? And it's really unfortunate to have those conversations with them without like having to also like talk about the necessity of them to unify with their tenants, right? Just to hear the fact that like landlords and tenants are organizing together to say, I'm not gonna pay my mortgage and you don't have to pay your rent, right? That sounds incredible. And it sounds like here in Chicago, that's not happening. And it's a missed opportunity, right? That we're seeing that unfortunately is like affecting all of us. Overall, yes, we've been kind of keeping track of all the filings of evictions that are still occurring during the pandemic at least in the Cook County area here in the city. And within that process, we've been able to identify some of the bigger corporations that we, FATU, had already been aware of many of the times, right? Because we carry on eviction like campaigns against them. But that we also are highlighting that the fact that they are already filing evictions and that they are carrying business as usual, regardless of this pandemic. And so we had an event virtually yesterday announcing this wall of shame, where we gave different awards to these different like companies and corporations and also attorneys, right? Because there's housing attorneys that are collaborating with many of these landlords and corporations to file those evictions, right? And so when you are doing certain things like that, then I don't know, but you kind of lose all the respect that I can have for any human or another human being, right? Like that kind of goes out the window, and I'm going to shame you and I'm going to do things that you're not going to like. You're going to see your picture everywhere on social media and on media, but that's up to you, because at the end of the day, you're still filing those evictions. So that's on you, and you can always change that yourself, right? But that's kind of the approach that we're kind of taking. And yeah, we'd love to kind of like sit down with Nancy and really talk about how they're doing those connections with those small landlords, because that is, I think, something that we really need to do in order to approach what cancellation of rent looks like, especially with being aware, right, that both low-income and working-class tenants and landlords are being affected by this pandemic very, very heavily in the United States.
I got lost, not being disrespectful, because I just realized how much I love the word autonomous. I was like, I'm an autonomous homosexual, or like I'm an autonomous, it just feels radical. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just feel it's very important to say that right now in this. No, I think one of the things I want to think about too, right, is like, because I think, essentially both of you came out of the undocumented queer movement, right? In very kind of like real ways, and very out of like moments of like, and even when you guys talk about it, it was like this organic thing. And I think one of the things like we're talking about a lot in this moment, right, is like you hear all these people saying things like, oh, I can't wait to go back to normal, right? I can't wait for things to get back to normal. And it's so weird because even like with rent, right, even our imagination for how to look for the solution to rent is like, how do we get the state, right, to back us up? How do we get them to give us kind of like some support? And I think one of the things that we overlook with the undocumented queer movement was like how forceful it was, how the amount of direct action, and and the radical imagination about it, which was like, no human is illegal, right? Like kind of this being like, actually, like these are the premises of it. And I'm saying that because as like I think about this, is like, this is a moment where we need to tell people, and we need to do our work as organizers, as activists, as people with dimple chins and colonized tips, is that we need to really like be like, yo, like here's how we never go back to to normal again. And so I know both of you, so much of your work is talking directly to people, right? Like, and so what are the things you would tell to people that are like watching right now, or tell people to tell to their neighbors, that is like, here is why this is important, and here is what, and what else could it look like? Because I think that's the problem. It was so bizarre. We had an education episode last week. This is me going, this should have been a 2 minute, this should have been a 1 minute question. I'm on 2-3 minutes right now. But like, But one of the things, we had an educational episode last week, and there was very simple things that were said in that I know people in my own family have never even questioned. You know what I mean? I've never even thought about. And it made me realize that like so much of even revolutionary thinking isn't necessarily just people being like, how do I get these, you know, how do I cling to this dominant thing that we're supposed to aspire to? Some of it is they haven't even been introduced. Some of the most basic element things, like we could have free Wi-Fi. And every city should have it, that it actually exists. The infrastructure actually exists. You know, and so when you're thinking about rent and this stuff, what is the stuff where it's like, yo, this is what you tell the people, this is what you say, right? Like this is what they need to know, and this is what is possible. Is that, I mean, and I hope that doesn't sound like theoretical or hokey, because I don't mean it to. I actually mean in the most real way of like, how do you get somebody on board to be like, another world is possible, right? Let me tilt my head right here because I feel like
Who wants to go first? Damn, that's a deep ass question, Ricardo.
In an annoying way. I don't mean to be like that bitch that's like, oh, like talking about people are fucking dying right now, right? I don't mean to be the person that's like, let's talk about what you say. Like, you know, that's not like, but I think in the most like real, like in the most real way.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know. I feel like when I look at rent, I'm kind of like, or this idea of going back to normal. I think for me, you know, when I look at rent, kind of my relationship to rent, my family's relationship to rent, I feel like, I don't know, like all of us have this kind of shared trauma of like the first of the month always being hella stressful time. Right. And I think like growing up, I think now that I'm a little bit older, I'm really pissed off at rent because I feel like my friends and people that I love, my family around me, like we all have way better shit to do than to be working to pay the rent. Like in humanity, like in civilization, you know, and that's kind of why I'm just like kind of excited about the moment. Or it is really fucked up times, but like I think it's getting us to rethink our time, right? Just how much time we need to spend in labor in order to pay this kind of thing that we have actually the capacity to provide for free, not for free, right? Just to provide, like to provide. Like so I think for me, like that's like looking at kind of like the rent in relationship to time and how much time and effort goes into paying these corporations or these landlords, right? When it could just go into like, I don't know, existing, being, you know, like contemplating our human existence. Like I'd rather be doing that than working to pay rent, to be honest. So I feel and I know I'm not the only one, right? And we can, you know, so I think that kind of for me, I think is the opportunity in this moment, and also, right, the fact that like I think there's a general, like I love the wall of shame. I think, you know, like in Boyle Heights, shaming definitely worked, right? Like putting people on blast, right? Because they don't like being confronted with the action that they're taking. And I think more and more people are kind of in the same boat, right? People don't have jobs. There's millions in unemployment, right? So I do think kind of like the environment itself will lead to more solidarity. But I think for me, yeah, just like the whole concept of like our time, like, and where do we spend it and how do we spend it? It just always has bothered me, like how much or how stressful it is. Basically, like we kind of cater our existence to be able to pay this monthly fee, you know, like it really does take over. It takes over everything, you know, like, I don't know. I just remember the first month always being hella fucking stressful for my family, you know, growing up in the hood. And I think it's something that like we don't need to go through. And I think, yeah, that's kind of like where the opportunity that I see.
No, I mean, it's also just weird when like when you think about it, because I think about for like my parents that like grew up, my mom that grew up across the street from like Cook County jail, right? Like my dad that grew up on like 26th and Millard and like moved so much when he was a kid just because it was like an immigrant like family that was like, you know, trying to survive, right? Like, and when they bought their home, that was like a thing that they were so proud of, right? That meant like some, you know, they were able to secure something. And I'm also thinking about, right, like this idea, even like me and Sean as being artists, right? Like Sally Mae calls me or any of my credit card companies and I press reject on that shit, right? I'm like, I will pay you. You will get it when you get it, right? But it is like with rent, it's so naturalized to me to think like, oh no, I got to pay this. Right. And that actually, even when and like someone like me that like has read all the shit about like how we internalize oppression and things like that, is still like, feels guilty when I can't do it. You know what I mean? Like when I'm like, oh crap, I'm like struggling. I'm like, damn, like, you know, and it is really weird how and I feel like, what did I do wrong? Like, and I start questioning all my choices. Like, man, I shouldn't have had 14 vodka tonics on a Friday. You know, I could have spent that on 3 mezcals and got a better buzz and less hangover. But like, but you know, I think it's important to like, but it is like one of those, you know, those things in which it is so ingrained in us to think that we need to pay rent to live on this planet, and that the fact that even like that's an abstraction. You know, me and Damon Williams, who works with the Hoodoisie, is doing amazing work. We're talking about this, how like that is just even an abstraction of our relationship to land, right? Like that capitalism does over and over again, like since like the enclosure acts of England in the 1800s, you know. All right, Antonio, I'm sorry. I needed to editorialize. I needed the world to know what I was thinking in that moment. I have a lack of self-control. I got checks on it when I was in kindergarten. Let's go. You're my favorite Gemini. No.
No way. Yeah, I think that it's difficult as it's been by the last kind of like months that we've been facing this pandemic. I also think that we all have been able to see the fragility of the system that we live in and capitalism itself, right? We get to actually ask ourselves whether we were actually living before and we actually had control over our lives. And we actually have this opportunity to change how we go back to living. And that is the opportunity that I hope that everybody is reflecting and that they take into consideration, right? That like we don't want to go back to normal like we used to before, right? Because right now, there are millions of people that are seeing and experiencing what oppression looks like. And that oppression, our communities was already experiencing prior to COVID-19. So I hope that all of those that are not able to pay rent, right, that are having financial insecurity, that are reflecting and seeing how fragile our like system is itself, right, that they get to organize and imagine what could be possible if millions of people, right, tomorrow will go out and call in their representatives, make a demonstration in whatever way possible while still doing social distancing, right? And declare and demand that things need to be different moving forward, that we don't want to go back to normal, that we want a better life than what we had before. And I think that if we do that successfully, then I think maybe we can look back into this moment in time in the future, right, and say that maybe this was necessary because the way that we were going and the path that we were leading into was actually going to be much more disastrous than what we're facing right now.
I love that your idea is like this, like mass, multiracial, beautiful, like multi-class protest, and mine was like, yo, I think my vision of revolution is like a bathhouse where like everybody, like nobody has a 6-pack, you know what I mean? It's like people of color, femmes, like trans people, but you know, to each their own. Good. Charles, you give us a throw him a question to close us out on before we get to Jackie's updates. Also, this is how I know Jackie's a print journalist. She's been having mad internet issues on this digital tech.
So specifically, I want you all to leave off with what can folks be doing right now at this moment to support your work going forward? How can folks plug into battles for our land, housing in general? Last final thoughts about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for folks in California or like in LA specific, if folks are interested in kind of the rent strike, right, how do you join and how you're in LA, so the locals created this website and it's called foodnotrent.org. So again, it's foodnotrent.org, and it has just really kind of straight up resources, like a sample letter that you could write to your landlord, things like that. So I just think, you know, like that's kind of step one, right, for folks that want to get involved. And I would say like step two is just kind of, I think there is a lot of power in autonomous organizing, right, and autonomy. And I think I've been, or like the most powerful organizing I've been able to do has been autonomously. So I would just say, you know, for folks to explore that, right, like if like don't rely on a group or a corporation or a nonprofit to kind of bring strategy together. It's going to be really like block by block, right, like HUD by HUD, city by city, how things are going to happen or move. So I would say kind of, yeah, like start building your kind of small network of people that you trust. Again, like, right, you don't got to know the whole hood. You don't got to be a chismosa like me going to Chicago and
Right.
befriending everyone, right? Just, yeah, like build your local squad, right? Build, even if it's with your family, right? Or if it's kind of with your friends who kind of are your chosen family or things like that. I think right in this moment, it's important to start building kind of outside of the system, and also a lot of us already have, right? So it's kind of like we're kind of ahead of the game in that sense. But for folks who kind of really want to support the rent strikes here in LA, I think also like if folks just follow on Instagram, LA Tenants Union, right? So at LA Tenants, that's kind of where a lot of the actions are being updated and folks are kind of taking collective action together. And yeah, I think, start even within ourselves, start imagining ways we want to use this time where it is chaotic. But I think, in every moment of chaos, there is opportunity. So it is kind of very valid to look at the opportunities that we have right now, to really kind of reassess the situation and start building with each other, right? And kind of knowing that it is going to be kind of those relationships that we build with each other that are really going to help us, and not relying on external things or resources as well to support us.
And to like do it tactically too is one of the things I think about. Like all of us here, right? Like are involved in like nonprofit activism in one way, right? Like I just got done writing for, in Hollywood, right? Like for some time, right? And that is not a clean industry necessarily, right? Like, but it is like how we are. I think one of the things I'm realizing, like this class of like activists that are maintaining radical vision and principles while engaging really tactically these things that are strategic, right? Like while not losing the vision. And I don't know, because I keep on thinking, going back to this moment in which like we can look at, I think Antonio, you said it too, like the fragility of these systems, right? And it being like, and at the same time, I always think about the way I have to talk to like some family members or like friends that are like still down for shit, like still think that nonprofit is like the exaltation of do-gooding, right? Like, and it is like, yes, okay, like that's where you're at, but like, and we could see that, but like, let's go further. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? And how we can also like in this moment, like right now, even with the Hoodoisie, I'm like, how can we are one of the only platforms, we are the only platform in Chicago providing critical education on some of this stuff that's only focused on like kind of media that isn't a nonprofit. And I'm like, how do I steal everything I can in this moment from whoever I can in this moment? You know what I'm saying? Just thought that you all wanted to know that. I'm gonna take another drink of my rosé right now. I'm gonna do a new angle. Antonio, bring us out.
Yeah, so I think for us, check out our website at autonomousunion.org so you can learn more about the organization itself, or add us on your favorite social media platform, right? From Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, we do it all, right? And we continuously put updates and different information about webinars. If you are in the state of Illinois, right, consider signing up for a petition, which overall can also connect you with other tenants that have the same landlord or that live in the same building as you, right? So that you can start creating that network and start talking to your neighbors that are probably facing the same conditions that you are facing right now. And then overall, like, feel and exercise your power. This is the opportunity that we have to create real change that was needed before COVID-19 and that we now have the platform and the opportunity to make it a reality. And if we don't exercise that power, right, nobody else will but ourselves. So I continue to like support, right, the empowerment of individuals, right, that regardless of being undocumented, of being tenant, like low-income tenants, that we still have a voice and we still could exercise that power together.
Antonio's motivational. You would have been like the other brown kid to me in the school where we're like the only brown kids in my imagination. And like, I'd have been like, damn, I hate this motherfucker, but also I love this motherfucker. Yo, I want to give it up for Nancy and Antonio. Give them all the emojis right now. Likes, that little new care thing that Facebook did. Like,
I love that care thing.
Even though it doesn't give us like that care emoji is so annoying because I'm like, Facebook, if you really care, just go broke and save the world. You have the money. So it's like, stop playing, right? Well, let's give it up for Nancy and for Antonio. Thank you so much. We'll be sharing all the links to so much stuff. A lot of them are already in the comment thread if you're looking right now. Shout out to Yasmin and Janie, our editorial producer and our social media manager. Like I had so much fun this evening, as depressing and heartbreaking as the circumstances that we're living through right now are. And thank you so much for your work. I want to invite you all to stay along as we get some updates and the Rona reflection from Charles this evening. Jackie, take it away.
Hey everyone, I have a few local updates, somewhat related to this show. So the mayor continues to mislead the people about the Hilco demolition process that about a month ago engulfed the immigrant community in a cloud of potentially toxic dust, as Ricardo mentioned earlier. First, she minimizes the severity of the problem when she calls this former coal plant a small building, when we're all well aware of the massive size of this thing and its dirty polluter past. And second, she's utterly failing to engage the community in a substantive way and insisting that the demolitions need to continue during this respiratory pandemic. That's why Little Village protesters showed up at her house in Logan Square last week to make some noise ahead of a second demolition. And that action actually pressured the mayor into delaying that demolition until further notice. Earlier today, 2 protesters showed up at City Hall, and they will continue to apply pressure until they get some kind of commitment from the mayor and from the city administration to consult the community and consult environmental experts, and also be transparent about the city processes that allow subsidizing developers and that allow questionable demolitions to happen. This week, there was also another explosion and a fire, this time in the Lincoln Park neighborhood at the General Irons metal shredder. This is the same dirty industry that is planning to leave this rich white neighborhood in the north side to move to the southeast side of the city, which is a working class industrial community with mostly Black and brown people, and is often neglected by elected officials. Environmental organizers and even the aldermen of the area want to take it further and are calling for this company to be shut down completely. I would like to highlight some mutual aid efforts that we have not yet mentioned on the show. The Chicago Coalition for the Homeless has started a fund for people who are housing insecure during the stay-at-home order. They're aiming to give grants to at least 300 individuals, and they're already received thousands of applications. So if you're interested in contributing or applying to that fund, you can go to chicagohomeless.org/mutual aid. The annual Dyke March is also launching a fund for Black, Indigenous, and people of color who live in Chicago and who are financially impacted by the pandemic. They are prioritizing queer, trans, intersex, disabled, and undocumented people. So please follow them on Facebook. Also, the Alliance of Filipinos for Immigrant Rights and Empowerment and the National Domestic Workers Alliance are offering emergency $400 grants to home care workers, to nannies, house cleaners, etc. You can find more information at domesticworkers.org. And to be honest, there are many neighborhoods that have some kind of local efforts that you can look into. Just remember that these are mostly nonprofit or volunteer run initiatives, and they have limited resources. I know that Humboldt Park, Albany Park, Edgewater, Little Village, Austin, Gage Park, and Back of the Yards are just some of those neighborhoods that have a local effort. So if I missed anybody, please add your links to the comments. And then finally, this week, Springfield will be discussing rent relief at the state level. State Representative Delia Ramirez, who is actually scheduled to be our guest very soon on this show, she introduced a proposal on Friday that would cancel rent debts and suspend mortgage payments for those experiencing hardships related to COVID-19. And she's also proposing a moratorium on foreclosures and new eviction filings throughout this crisis and beyond. Oh, and then one last thing. There is an extension to the property tax bill. We know that property taxes can be the difference between someone keeping or losing their home. So Tony Preckwinkle, who is the president of the Cook County Board, is backing an effort to give property owners some financial breathing room and is waiving any late fees on their tax bills that are due August 3rd. So this extension goes up until October, and you don't have to pay anything until that month. And that is everything that I have. Thank you.
Hey, so I do want to give a shout out to El Foro de Pueblo that has been behind a lot of the organizing that we've been seeing happening, that's been trying to hold Lightfoot accountable. I also want to give a shout out to two of our members that have been involved in that, specifically Laura Ramirez, that has been showing up and showing out around there. She even put a banner on Alderman Mike Rodriguez's crib to call him out for staying silent. I also want to give a shout out to Alejandro Reyes, who's been really great in terms of helping capturing and documenting a lot of the activism and actions that have been happening. Antonio, if you need that support for the Autonomous Tenants Union, let us know. Nancy, I do not have the budget to fly him to California, but I will call someone around there. And also to Gloria Glow, who has been involved in that activism as well, and one of our past guests. And I could name like 20 other people, actually, now that I realize that several of our past guests have been there. Nobody feel bad for me not saying your name. It's not about that. It's about justice. I also want to invite everyone to tune in on Memorial Day to an event that I will be hosting. It is organized by Ryan Greenlee and Tara Willis. It's the Zoom Cookout Concert, and it will be tuning in. We'll have performances from some notable Chicago artistic dynamos like Darling Shear and Goya Paz, and Martine Whitehead, and we'll be raising money for correspondence and art poetry classes, donations of vital supplies like soap and hand sanitizer, and just supporting decarceration organizing. And then all of it will go to the Stateville Correctional Center for people that are locked up for over 20 hours a day. I know Charles has done some work with people from Stateville, like Timmy Chow, who actually, Nancy, on your episode, got up and was one of the people that that spoke and commented during it. He said good stuff, so don't worry, it's a good thing. So check that out. We'll be posting stuff on our social media around that. It is time for the Rona reflection, so I just want to throw that over to Charles. Psych.
And happy birthday!
This is Charles' 30th birthday, you all. So actually, instead of making him read his intellectual property, what I would like to do is have all of us online in this Zoom sing happy birthday to Charles and to tune on in his 30th birthday. It's one of my favorite beings in the whole entire world, and one of the so glad for this show for bringing us into connection. Y'all ready? Because you guys are better singers than me, I can guarantee it. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday. Couple times, because we all are awkward about this. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Charles.
Happy birthday to you.
Charles is like the Mexican.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Delegation.
I wasn't ready.
Yeah, me neither. I'm a dancer, not a singer.
Yo, Charles is like the Mexican delegation can't sing, and that's why everyone knows. Like, yo, we got Selena, right? Or the we got a bunch of Central American, South American, brilliant Latinx singers. We're just not them, Charles. Okay.
Hey, I appreciate it anyway. Like, I love y'all. Thank y'all so much.
Let's go for Charles' 30th birthday. Charles is very humble, but they have been significantly involved in saving Chicago State University, staying loyal to their community in Roseland. We were just texting last night, and I was like, "Yo, we were texting last night about our inadequacies," and I was like, "Yo, homie, like you got to think about all the things you're doing, which is like helping out mutual aid efforts, even in this moment right now." Donating for the past 30 days for their 30th birthday to 2 organizations a day. And supporting that work. And you're the shit. We're so lucky to have you on the show. Love you so much. Let's give Charles a round of applause, virtually and otherwise. Right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.
Hey, Charles. You want to come say hi, babe? You want to come say hi?
Sure.
This is my partner that's been pouring me rosé throughout the night because they're so supportive. That's a fake shy. They're an actor. They get up on stage all the time. I'm putting up with that shit. But just want to tell everyone to tune in next week. We'll be looking at another series. We'll be having a 2-part series on being locked up during lockdown. And then come on back after that for more on housing and stuff like that. Stay tuned for the Hoodoisie. We'll have more programming coming out in addition to this. And love you all. One more time for our guests, Nancy and Antonio, and one more time for Charles. Thank you all.